Sarah Reed, 32, worked as a cashier at a small supermarket in Indiana, always punctual, covering evening shifts, occasionally buying food for elderly neighbors from her own pocket. That evening, she heard desperate screams from outside the entrance. A young boy had collapsed in the parking lot, convulsing. Eyes rolled back, no one dared approach. Sarah abandoned her register and rushed outside. She used CPR skills learned from her late father, a military doctor, and restored the boy's heartbeat in just 42 seconds. When the ambulance arrived, the boy had started breathing again. Sarah returned inside, clothes stained with blood, hair disheveled, no chance to apologize to waiting customers. The manager stared at her coldly, then tossed a form across the counter. "You abandoned your position without authorization, you're fired." She didn't argue, just stood silently, gathered her old first aid kit, and walked out of the store. No one walked her out, no one asked how the boy was doing through the glass doors. She watched as customers whispered, some looking shocked, others uncomfortable. The manager had already called another cashier to take her place. Sarah walked to her car, hands still trembling from the adrenaline. Her mind replayed the boy's face turning from blue to pink as oxygen returned to his system. Worth it, she thought at home. She carefully washed the blood from under her fingernails. She hung her name badge on a hook by the door. 7 years at the same store, ended with a single form. Her phone buzzed with messages from co-workers. "What happened? Are you okay?" But no call from management, no acknowledgement of her actions. Sarah fell asleep that night, wondering how the boy was doing, whether his parents knew what happened, whether anyone had told them about the cashier who'd stepped in when everyone else froze. She had no regrets. Her father had always said, "Protocol matters until someone's dying. Then all that matters is what you do next." The termination letter sat unsigned on her kitchen table. Tomorrow, she'd have to start looking for a new job. Single mothers in small towns couldn't afford principals without paychecks. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sarah felt something she hadn't in years. Her father would have been proud. Have you ever seen someone punished just for doing the right thing? Leave disrespected. If you believe a good person shouldn't be fired for saving a life, stay with us, because what happens next is even more surprising. Sarah woke the next morning to the sound of powerful engines above her roof. She opened her door. 2 Black Hawk helicopters, circling low over her residential neighborhood. A black SUV blocked her driveway. A man in military uniform stepped out and said, clearly Sarah Reed, "We'd like you to come with us. We won't force you, but someone is waiting for you at Fort Dalton Base." Sarah thought there must be some mistake. But the soldier held a letter with U.S. Department of Defense letterhead in the vehicle. They showed her a video clip, her performing chest compressions extracted from the store's security cameras. The boy in the footage was Lieutenant Colonel Anderson's son, a Special Forces medical officer, currently on assignment in Africa. Sarah knew nothing about this, but the soldier explained he requested satellite access as soon as he heard his son was hospitalized, and the first thing he saw was you. She was being invited to the base, not for questioning, but to be honored. Sarah stared out the window as military installations came into view. Her mind raced back to childhood, watching her father put on his uniform, explaining what each insignia meant, teaching her how to bandage wounds. Just in case, the SUV passed through 3 security checkpoints, each with armed guards, who nodded respectfully when they saw the paperwork. "I don't understand," Sarah said quietly. "I'm just a cashier." The young soldier driving smiled in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, there's no just about what you did." Inside a large hangar, dozens of service members stood in formation. Sarah felt completely out of place in her civilian clothes, walking between rows of pressed uniforms. A stern-faced officer approached. The store's security footage was uploaded to the base's medical training system, standard procedure for analyzing civilian emergency response. Lieutenant Colonel Anderson recognized the location. His son was spending the weekend with his grandparents. While the colonel was deployed, within 30 minutes of seeing that footage, another officer added the colonel had received special permission to fly home. "He's been in combat zones for 8 months straight." Sarah's hands trembled. "I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have known." The officer interrupted gently. "The footage shows 12 adults standing frozen. Only you moved." A door opened at the far end of this hangar. A tall man in combat fatigues walked purposefully toward her, his face showing the strain of a long journey and too little sleep. "Miss Reed," he said, voice breaking slightly, "my son would have died within 2 minutes without oxygen to his brain. The paramedics were 7 minutes away." Sarah felt tears welling up. Is he okay? Lieutenant Colonel Anderson nodded, struggling to maintain his composure. Thanks to you. Yes, completely at Fort Dalton. Sarah met Lieutenant Colonel Anderson in person, just returned from overseas. He approached, knelt down, and presented her with an item. A tactical medical badge reserved for civilians who saved the lives of military officers' family members. Anderson addressed the gathered crowd while I was locked down in a forward base. My son was in danger, and the person who saved him wasn't a doctor, but a woman with an old first aid kit and a steady heart. A high-ranking officer stepped forward. We want to officially name Sarah Reed as a civilian protector, registered permanently at the Military Medical Academy. Sarah couldn't speak, she just cried. She received a letter personally signed by the Secretary of Defense. Thank you for acting when no regulation required it, but for which the entire nation should be grateful. The news footage spread rapidly. Woman fired for saving a life, now honored by military. Meanwhile, the supermarket that fired her faced hundreds of thousands of angry comments. The manager was transferred internally. Local residents began posting notes, saying kindness isn't wrong. Firing is around the area. The store's corporate headquarters issued a hasty statement. We're investigating the incident and reviewing our emergency protocols, but social media had already rendered its verdict. Sarah's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Job offers, interview requests, and messages from strangers, thanking her for restoring their faith in humanity. The military ceremony was broadcast live on 3 networks, as Anderson pinned the medal to Sarah's blouse. He said something the microphones didn't catch, but Sarah would never forget. My son calls you his guardian angel. He wants to be a medic now, just like you. After the ceremony, a group of military medical personnel approached Sarah. Their leader, a gray-haired woman with commander's insignia, handed her a business card. We train people to do exactly what you did. Instinctively, we could use someone with your capabilities to help teach our combat medics about performing under pressure. Sarah stared at the card. But I'm not qualified. I just remembered what my dad taught me. The commander smiled. Sometimes the best teachers are those who act without thinking about protocols or certifications. You didn't freeze. That's what we need to understand. That afternoon, as Sarah prepared to leave the base, a familiar black SUV pulled up. Inside sat the CEO of the supermarket chain, looking decidedly uncomfortable. Miss Reed, we've made a terrible mistake. We'd like to offer you your position back with a substantial raise, and Sarah stopped him with a raised hand. I'm sorry, but I don't think that's where I belong anymore. As she walked away, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It was a picture of a young boy in a hospital bed, smiling weakly, holding a hand-drawn sign. Thank you for being brave when others weren't. Sarah saved the photo, knowing no job title or salary could ever match what that image was worth that evening. A reporter asked why she hadn't sued the supermarket for wrongful termination. Sarah looked directly into the camera and said, because being right isn't about getting even, it's about doing better next time, and I think we all just learned that lesson. Have you ever seen someone forgotten for doing good? Leave their name below. Sarah didn't accept any money. She only asked to keep her old first aid kit. A month later, she started offering free CPR training. Every Sunday for local residents, dozens attended each session, including elderly neighbors' children, and even her former co-workers from the supermarket. She didn't teach with PowerPoint presentations. She simply raised her hands and said, I once lost my job for saving someone. But through that I learned I was living right. A small boy approached to hug her after one session, whispering, You saved me that day. Mom says I can finally meet you now. Sarah said nothing. She just sat down and held the boy for a long time. The training sessions grew larger each week. Local businesses donated equipment. The fire department offered their training room when Sarah's garage became too small. Lieutenant Colonel Anderson sometimes attended with his son, now fully recovered. He would quietly help demonstrate techniques, never mentioning his rank or that the boy was his. Sarah's life transformed in ways she never expected. The Military Medical Academy offered her a civilian instructor position. 3 days a week, she taught emergency response to military personnel. The other days she taught civilians in her community. Her father's old medical books found new purpose, arranged on shelves in the small classroom. She now called her own, Sometimes she'd catch herself touching his handwriting in the margins, little notes that had saved a boy's life, decades after they were written. The supermarket changed too. A new policy was instituted across the entire chain life. Saving actions take priority over all standard protocols. Every store now had designated emergency responders on staff. Sarah never returned to shop there, but she didn't discourage others. Systems can learn, she would say, just like people. 6 months after that fateful day, Sarah stood before a high school assembly. Her once tattered first aid kit now, framed in a shadow box, displayed beside her. You will face moments when rules and humanity seem to conflict. She told the teenagers in those moments, remember that policies can be rewritten, but lives can't be restored. Choose wisely. As she left the stage, students lined up to shake her hand. But Sarah noticed one girl hanging back, looking uncertain. I wouldn't have been brave enough, the girl admitted when Sarah approached. Sarah smiled gently. Bravery isn't something you have, it's something you find when it matters. In a world that puts rules above ethics, Sarah chose her heart. She didn't need rewards or media attention. She just needed to know the boy survived. And sometimes right isn't what's written in the employee handbook, it's in how you step forward when others hesitate. She lost her job, but an entire system had to stand up because of one right action. What about you? Will you choose silence or will you stand up? Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, but what you do when everyone is watching and choosing to do nothing. You had no right to leave your station without reporting. The manager bellowed above the store. Sarah still gasped, her blouse splattered with blood, having rescued a boy in cardiac arrest outside. No one inquired after her well-being, just a cursory termination. Notice the next day 2 Black Hawk helicopters roared low across her roof. Who had summoned them?